In this video, I want to respond to a question from Deborah. I'm hoping that there's not too much background noise. I still have contractors here working on the fence, but I think the background noise should be mostly minimal. We'll do our best. So Deborah says, good message on recognizing distractions, but my question is, are there ever good distractions? And do you believe that the enemy brings distractions as well as pains, people and things that are major distractions? And how do you know when a situation to help someone or be there for someone is not a distraction when you see the good in it or how it makes another feel loved and appreciated? Like you mentioned, cooking. My main distraction is getting rid of stuff and keeping our property up, which when we get behind, it is hard for us to catch up. I understand spending time alone and isolated with the Father, but the struggle for me is keeping my mind stayed on Him and thanking Him for giving us strength to do what needs to be done. Is that still being distracted with exceptions? When I'm in pain, I can't do anything. I usually attribute that as Satan's attack. But now you have shown a different way of looking at this. But when I plan to do something or go somewhere or be with someone and something unexpected happens that keeps me away, I know that is God's way of saying, no, don't go there or don't do that. Still peeling layers of false teachings. Okay, let me try to just break this message apart and answer each thing that I'm hearing right here. The first question is, are there ever good distractions? And the first thing that I think is I want to picture Jesus and also the apostles. Was there anything that they were distracting themselves with? No real indication that they were distracting themselves with anything. Our minds are supposed to be prudent. We're supposed to be attuned to the Lord all the time. And a distraction inherently is pulling us away from the Lord. It's distracting us from Him. And so in anything that you're doing, you want to be glorifying Him, whether it's in the body, whether eating or drinking or cooking or whatever it is that you're doing, you want to be glorifying Him and you want to be attuned to Him. So a distraction by definition is something that's taking you away from His Spirit. Now, a lot of us, when we first start healing or we first start doing this work, we've basically been in distraction mode most of the time without even realizing that it's distraction. And if you haven't fasted yet, you're not going to recognize that. You're not going to know what I'm talking about because as you begin to fast, you start to realize how frequently and how much of the time you've been in fear and you've been in distraction. Now, in order for us to understand distraction, I think it's really important that we understand the spirit of fear. You have a feeling of fear, and that feeling has been given to you in order to understand that you need to stay close to the Father. That feeling is good by design, and if you have any question about that, I want you to consider one thing. If a child does not have fear of being separated from their parent, they are going to, when you're in public places, they're just going to run off and do their own thing, and they're not going to be concerned that you're not around. And that's going to be a major problem for safety. However, a child who has fear, the feeling of fear, when they become separated from their parent and they notice that they're not around their parent, they're going to feel that feeling of fear, and it's going to cause them to make sure that they obey and that they stay close so that they don't end up in this terrible situation of being separated from their parents again. That's why our Father gave us the feeling of fear, in order to alert us that we need to return. The spirit of fear, on the other hand, slithers into chinks in our armor, being lukewarm, unoccupied, and unresolved suffering. That spirit of fear is going to slither into those chinks in our armor. So, for example, you have unresolved suffering. When that gets triggered, you engage in the work of your hands to try to control that terrifying feeling and make it go away. Now you've engaged in the sin of idolatry and you've invited a spirit in because that is the spirit you've chosen. If God has given you a feeling of fear in order to alert you to return to Him, but you choose self-sufficiency instead, you've chosen to spurn Him, you've chosen to reject the design He's given you in order to return to Him, and you've chosen idolatry, even in choosing self. That's self-idolatry. Now here's the tactic of that spirit. that spirit is going to compel you. People use that word incorrectly all the time. Compulsion is different from conviction. God convicts you. He does not compel you to do anything, because when you're compelled, you're in a state of impulse, heightened anxiety, and fear. You are not able to think straight. You're being hijacked. There's a sense of urgency, not a sense of prudence. So you have to recognize the fruit of who is sending that thing. Conviction's a different thing. God is going to prompt you and move you and speak to you. But compulsion means I got to do this right now. You are in a hijacked state. You are compelled, and that is from the devil. You should be able to notice that when you're distracting yourself. Am I feeling compelled to distract myself, or am I able to put this down? God should be convicting you, and if you're not responding to God's convictions, then you are compelled by another spirit. So there also has to be some sort of structure and limits that you've set around certain things. And the way that you're going to discover those limits is by fasting, is by returning to God. So that when you return to God, now he's moving you according to what he wants from you. He's moving you according to the relationship and the attunement that you're supposed to have with him. The relationship that I thought I was supposed to have with him has grown into something that I wouldn't have even recognized. This would not have even been in my repertoire to be this slowed down. And a lot of times when I'm working with people, they're having a hard time even finding time to do a fast, to do the work, to read the word, to pray. They consider it a success to do something 3 days a week, right? And it's very difficult for them to find that time. And it can get discouraging because they start to think, well, I'm just not going to have the time to do this. Not realizing that this is what we're here to do. This is what's important. All of those things that the world has told us are so important, like working a 9 to 5 and being so busy and not having time to even come up for air, is not the way that God has intended for us to live. And will he not provide a way for us to live as he has intended? I would have had no clue that I would be having as much time as I have in a day to be with the Lord. He has made a way for that to happen because that's his will. But I will tell you in full disclosure that my life was a constant distraction. I could not sit still. I was always in compulsion. And in fact, that I even used that compulsion to motivate me onto the next thing. Everything always having to be in its place. Everything always having to be clean. Everything always, having to always on to the next thing. Always thinking that, at some point I'm going to get to the bottom of this to-do list and then I'll rest. And there's never a bottom of the to-do list. There's never a completed to-do list. That spirit of fear will not let you rest because then you'll be thinking about what needs to go on the next to-do list. There's always something that you could do by the work of your hands. So understanding compulsion and the spirit of fear is key to understanding why it is that you're distracting and how you are supposed to be. Fasting is critical. It is essential. You are not going to come to understanding of what your soul is supposed to feel like, how your soul is supposed to be attuned to God if you do not fast. Now, this is kind of a hard one because there are some things that we need to do that can easily be turned into distractions, can easily be turned into compulsions. So we have to be aware of what it is that we're feeling. We have to be engaged in some sort of process of examining our feelings and examining our experiences and any chinks in the armor. Otherwise, what's going to happen is that when we start to feel a feeling of fear, and what is he doing in that moment? He's alerting us, hey, come in deeper. I want to talk to you. Come in deeper. You're starting to spin out. I want to teach you something. When we start to feel that, and could that have to do with circumstances? Certainly it could have to do with circumstances. Usually when we feel fear, we start thinking of a number of circumstances in our heads. But if we're not dealing with it correctly, we can easily start channeling that into Distraction. Again, we have to go back to fasting. We're going through this constant process of the flesh trying to pull us back and us needing to say, nope, not going to choose you. Circumcise, discipline, get back into the heart and spirit. And then the flesh is going to keep on trying to get its tentacles back into you. And for this reason, you may not even realize how the flesh has gotten its tentacles back into you. This is the reason why we must engage in fasting on a regular basis. It's checks and balances, and it's also a way that we circumcise from the sinful flesh, discipline the physical flesh, get back into the heart and spirit. Now, not only that, but I've shared with you in other videos that it's not only about getting back to equilibrium. God expects us to keep growing and to get deeper into Him. There's no such thing as status quo. We need to be continually getting deeper and deeper into Him. So everything that I'm saying right now, if you're not fasting, you're really not going to get it. You have to experience and feel what I'm talking about through that process. So yes, you can distract yourself with caretaking, things that are good. But if you're using them as an idol, or you're using them in order to avoid returning to God, it's no longer a good thing. If, for example, on Sabbath, you've heard it said that it is good to do good on the Sabbath. And so if you're doing something good for someone, then you do that. However, if you have set things up so that you're constantly doing for others, so that you don't have to sit down and circumcise and face God, then it's a problem. Then it's a distraction and a compulsion because it's separating you from Him. So in all things, you should be asking yourself the question, am I connected to God? Am I communicating with Him right now? Or am I getting back into works, into the flesh, physical works and carnal thought? Or am I living by the Spirit? Am I in the Spirit? I don't believe that there are ever any good distractions. If you're doing good for someone and you're attuned to God's Spirit, you're going to be doing that with intention and prudence and with God. But if you're using it as a distraction, you're going to separate from Him. You won't be attuned to Him. So one of the questions here is, how do you know when a situation to help someone or be there for someone is not a distraction when you see the good in it or how it makes another feel loved and appreciated? I think I answered that question, but if I didn't, let me know and I'll elaborate. The thing that I really want to tell you is the key has to be attunement to God. You have to be with Him and doing this with Him, and He's going to move you by His Spirit. He's going to teach you. I can talk about some of the fruit. I can talk about how it feels like I'm doing, but only God is going to minister this to you. So sometimes you have to cut all of it out in order to fully circumcise and return to Him, and then you can go back into it with Him. Okay, now one of the things that she said is, I understand spending time alone and isolated with the Father, but the struggle for me is keeping my mind stayed on Him and thanking Him for giving us strength to do what needs to be done. Is that still being distracted with exceptions? This here is an indication that there's some compulsion going on. And we know that compulsion comes from Satan. And so if you are finding that you're not able to return to God, like you're struggling to get into Him, you really need to do a concerted fast. You need to sit and list all of the idols you've placed before Him, and you need to return to Him in your heart. Because it's not the will of the Father for anything to stand between you and Him. So you have placed things between you and Him, whether it's worries and preoccupations and whatever it is, everything's got to go. So you sit down with Him, make a list of all of the things you've been placing before Him, and fast for 3 days. That doesn't mean you don't eat for 3 days. You can do a modify your food. So like, for example, I've talked about eating from the hours of 12 to 4. I give myself that window when I'm fasting. And in the evening, I'm a snacker. Like I am not really hungry earlier in the day, but in the evening I want a snack and I tend to distract myself with that. So that is a fast for me. I'm giving my body just enough, but I'm not allowing my physical flesh to rule over me. Because if I allow my physical flesh to start ruling over me, my sinful flesh will inevitably rule over me. So again, you have to receive the personal things from him. You know, I can teach you these principles, I can share my testimony with you, but you really have to receive directly from him. What's the personal ministry that he knows that you need? Something else that she says here is, when I'm in pain and can't do anything, I usually attribute that as Satan's attack. But now you have shown me a different way of looking at this. I'm so glad that you're hearing that. But when I plan to do something or go somewhere or be with someone and something unexpected happens that keeps me away, I know that is God's way of saying, no, don't go there or don't do that. Okay, good. You're moving from being focused on Satan to being focused on God. And I know that a lot of that comes from counterfeit Christianity, making you think that you need to be like, the word says be aware of the schemes of the devil. It doesn't say be focused on the schemes of the devil. And a lot of these so-called deliverance ministries are trying to make a name for themselves, and they act like you need some sort of doctorate on Satan and all the many spirits and all of these other things. All of those spirits are subject to God. Why would you put your focus on Satan? You know what I mean? So it's really important that we're focused on the sovereignty of God. He is sending everything. There's not a single thing that Satan sends. He had to stand before God and ask God and receive permission from God and instruction from God on what he could do to Job. Satan has no ability to do anything that you have not handed over to him or God is not using for his purpose. And so if that's the truth, it does us no good to fight it. We have to lean into what is God's purpose in this. What is he teaching me? And the only way to receive that is to receive it from him. If you're in physical pain, I recommend that you do some of the body metaphor work in Heart Known series so that you can learn how God speaks through your body, speaks through your feelings, speaks through your circumstances and experiences. It's very important that you begin to attune yourself to the design that God has given you so that you learn to perceive how he is speaking. Because truly, every part of your soul, your mind, body, heart, and spirit need to be conformed to him. So if you're not perceiving how he's speaking into your body, how he's speaking into your mind, how he's speaking into your feelings, your dreams, your situations, if you're not perceiving that, you're not perceiving that he's in everything. How are you going to glorify him in everything? How is your soul going to be conformed to him if you're only expecting to hear from him in one aspect of your soul? Every fiber of your being needs to be changed. All of it needs to be changed in him. Please let me know if this was helpful. Please let me know if you have more questions or if there's anything that you'd like me to elaborate on or even give examples. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.